on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey, Dylan.
Hey.
What's up?
Wait, okay, so the roles are going to be reversed today. So how are you doing, Heather?
I'm dandy, Dylan.
Oh, wow.
I've been anticipating this moment all week.
Oh, yeah? Really?
Yeah. The moment we could sit down in our fancy podcast chairs.
They are comfy.
And you would take the reins and lead the show into future success.
I'm going to run this coach off in the ditch.
I don't believe it. No, you're like a Clydesdale.
So here we are, a lovely January day in Western North Carolina.
Are we talking about the weather?
Nice and mild. And Heather did put the story together, full disclosure, so it won't be totally,
Why are you telling? Everybody would think that you were the genius behind the episode.
No, I cannot take credit for your work any more than I already do.
Okay.
So you have anything to open up with before we dive into this really great story in Tennessee?
Do I have anything to open up with?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a lot happening in the true crime world, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, tell me about some of it. I saw something interesting earlier. Now, this is just it's goofy, but Brian Kohberger and Ted Bundy, I saw side-by-side pictures, and they look like they could be brothers.
Oh, yeah?
Would you agree? Have you looked?
I haven't.
But
you did mention this in passing.
Has the crazy eyes. He has the almost the devious intelligence that, how Bundy, I don't know. Sometimes people act like he was maybe smarter than I thought he really was, because I thought he looked clownish in the courtroom trying to represent himself. But I don't know. It's scary. It's disturbing how much they look alike.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I did not know that Kohberger and Ted Bundy were twins, Dylan, but thanks for sharing. I did recently learn that Alex Murdaugh's son sent Snapchats to friends before he was killed, and they're saying that the video is critical to the case.
Now, why in the world has it been this long and we're just now hearing about that? That's wild.
Well, this information is being released as the murder trial approaches. If you're unfamiliar, Alec Murdaugh is a disgraced lawyer who was charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime for allegedly shooting his wife Maggie and son Paul back in 2021. So in some court documents filed this past week, Deputy Attorney General Creighton Waters revealed that Paul sent a Snapchat video to several friends at 7:56 p.m. on the night he and his mother were killed. And though Waters didn't state what the footage specifically contained, he described the video as being critical to the case. The contents of the video is important to proving the state's case in chief.
Wow. I would love to know what's on that video.
He petitioned for Snapchat to testify at the trial, which is scheduled to begin on Monday, and is expected to last about 3 weeks, according to the filing.
That's such a wild story, the Murdaugh case, because, when it first happened, you had all that boat accident the youngest son had, and was it retribution or revenge for all that mess? And then it comes out, that the patriarch, Alec Murdaugh, I always screw the name up, tried to arrange him, his own botched killing or attack on the side of the road, and then all the fraud and defrauding. Man, I listened to something that went in depth on his embezzlement and what he did to certain families through his law practice, and it was disgusting. He would get these huge settlements off of these people's injuries and life-changing events and just give them a paltry amount and absorb the rest and funnel it through friends and banks. I mean, it's just so disgusting. But there's no doubt in my mind he had a hand. He was responsible for the death of his wife and son. at this point.
Well, in other court documents, they have also subpoenaed Google for records concerning the location data of devices when the killings occurred. Google replied and said the devices mentioned weren't at the Murdaug's home at the time of the crime. Snapchat and Google did not respond to People's request for comment. And of course, lawyers for Alec Murdaugh declined to comment when they were asked about this. So this is what apparently went down, Dylan. On the evening of June 7th, Alec allegedly reached out to his wife Maggie, asking her to meet him at the family's 1,770-acre estate in the small town of Islandton, South Carolina.
Yeah, it's just a little, kind of small, quaint country property.
Now, according to law enforcement, Alec told his wife that his 81-year-old father, Randolph III, was in failing health and that she needed to visit with him before he passed away. Several sources claim that Maggie and Alec had hit a rough patch in their marriage, and they weren't living together at the time. She was staying at the family's beach house on Edisto Island, which was about an hour away from the family's estate. So Maggie initially did not want to meet Alec at the family home, suggesting instead they meet at a hospital. But then she relented and met him at the property. She was going to meet him there and then follow Alec to the hospital in her own vehicle. On her way to the house, Maggie allegedly messaged a friend saying that something about her husband's behavior felt fishy.
Wow.
And she even wrote, "He's up to something."
Oh my gosh.
When Maggie arrived at the home, she left her car running and walked to the dog kennels on the estate where her son Paul was taking photos of a dog he was watching for a friend. Now, it's unclear what happened next, but Maggie and Paul were gunned down close to the dog kennels. They say Paul's body was found half in and half out of the dog kennel area.
I did not realize their relationship was they were at odds like that, where she didn't even
I
want.
wasn't aware of that either. I haven't really been following the case as closely as some folks, and I know there is a podcast that has been kind of keeping people abreast of the information and developments, like as they come out. I haven't really been paying too much attention, so this is all surprising to me. I did not know that Paul was shot in the chest and head with a shotgun at close range.
Jesus.
Maggie was shot multiple times. She had a shot to the back and other shots while she was lying on the ground. She had been shot with a .300 blackout ammo from an AR-style rifle, and both of them were pronounced dead at the scene.
My God, that's just a brutal slaying of two people. I mean, there's no way around
His
it.
wife and son.
Yeah. How cruel is that? Bait them in to kill them.
It's so interesting to me these days how I know we were kind of bashing social media the last episode a little bit, but it is pretty interesting to me how some of these criminal cases, they are able to use that digital footprint as evidence.
Well, I
With
think
Snapchat, Google, all these apps and devices tracking our movements.
I think we were talking about the cons of social media mostly, but there are certainly some pros. And I think that's one of them. You have this kind of breadcrumb trail that's there forever. It just has to be found, on the internet. But yeah.
And just like Snapchat here, we know that in the Delphi murders, the Snapchat video has been a very crucial piece of evidence as well.
Well, see, we've evolved to the point where there's always these third-party vendors that you're kind of running through or using their platform. And so even if you get the device from the person and destroy it, hide it, erase it, that information's out there somewhere in a server.
On a cloud.
In the cloud, and you don't have access to it.
I just like to imagine the information is just resting on a cloud.
It's just up there chilling.
Floating in the sky somewhere.
Yeah. So thank you for that. That was a very interesting and disturbing at the same time. Yeah, that was more disturbing than the fact that Brian Koberger and Ted Bundy are doppelgangers.
I will be following the trial as it takes place next week.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure there's going to be some interesting information come out of the trial. And if any, I think it's obvious what this guy's motivation was, financial. He was in such, everything was falling apart for him. It was all coming to light, all the embezzlement from his law firm. And yeah. And that's just a really sick reason to kill your own family.
Wild.
They would even secretly take out life insurance policies and stuff on their clients. Yeah, they were disgusting. And Everyone connected to him that helped him work his scheme should be held accountable as well. Because there's people in banking, there's people in other lawyers and stuff like that. And he would always funnel people to, his little pack of crony buddies. And it's very disgusting.
It's amazing what rich people get away with.
It is. My quaint country estate, the 1,700 acre hunting estate. It's just a little country home.
Yeah, no big deal.
And it must really suck to drive from your beach house, and then drive out to the country estate. It's such a pain in the ass.
It's terrible.
You should be able
I know when I leave you, I would love to stay in our beach house, but we don't have one, so.
So that's what's keeping you here?
I guess I'm stuck with you.
The fact that we have no homes.
Except the one we live in. Exactly.
All right. So in this month, we are in the state of Tennessee.
We are.
And this week, I will be, what would you call? The head honcho?
You're the host. You're the hostess with the mostest.
I'm the hostess with the mostest. Okay. So we're going to start. We're going to get started.
I'm ready,
You see how
Dylan.
natural this is?
It's very natural. I've been waiting for this moment.
Me too.
I'm not the only one.
I'm not going to be.
Listeners are super stoked.
Oh, I'm just glad that I
to have a
didn't.
Dylan-centric episode. They're
I-
so rare.
I'm glad I didn't write it because that gives me a little bit of hope of it sounding good. Okay, so we're going to start in Darden, Tennessee this week, and it is located in Henderson County in the western central part of the state. It's a small town with only about 372 residents, and now I would call that tiny.
That's like a community.
That's a community.
Maybe not even a town.
The schools in Darden are highly rated, and one website described it as a suburban rural mixville. Darden is located smack in the middle between Nashville and Memphis, a conservative area surrounded by churches, and it's home to families and God-fearing people. Holly Bobo was born October 12, 1990, to parents Dana and Karen. Holly had the brightest of futures. At 20 years old, she was enrolled at the University of Tennessee in the nursing program. The Bobo family was active in church, and reportedly, Holly would sing like an angel. Talent ran in the family. Holly's cousin is country singer Whitney Duncan. Holly was described as shy but sweet. On the morning of April 13th, 2011, Holly set her alarm for 4:30 a.m. that morning because she had some last-minute studying to do for one of her nursing classes. The morning started off completely normal for Holly, and she allegedly studied, had some breakfast, and then around 7:30 a.m., she took a call from her boyfriend, Drew Scott.
So she sounds like a studious young woman setting an alarm to get up at 4:30 and study for a nursing exam.
Well, yeah, it sounds like she's, trying to do her best job and not afraid to go the extra mile.
I can say with all honesty, I've never once set an alarm for 4:30 in the morning so I could get up and study.
No.
And you know what they say, C's get degrees, Dylan.
Well, it's the same degree, right? I mean, their degree looks just like mine, right?
I just didn't study to earn mine, right?
On that morning, Drew was nearby on Holly's grandmother's property, turkey hunting. The pair had a brief conversation like any other, with Drew wishing her well on the exam in which she had been studying. And again, it's such a big deal. They've seen her, are seeing her put all this effort in, that everybody knows she has an exam, she's going to kill it, So, yet again, she was probably a good student. Better than me.
And turkey hunting on a spring morning.
Yeah. People say turkeys are hard to hunt.
My dad likes to turkey hunt.
Yeah, they're hard to get anywhere near enough to get a shot. And but at the same time, they say turkeys are stupid. And that they'll drown staring straight up in the rain.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's actually true. It was roughly 10 minutes after that call ended that a neighbor heard a young woman screaming. The neighbor called Karen Bobo at work. The screaming had caused the family's dog to bark, which resulted in waking Holly's brother, Clint. Now, this is very strange. This is a very
strange story.
Karen had only left the house about 20 minutes early, and everything seemed fine. At the time she left, Holly was already up studying. 25-year-old Clint was asleep, and her husband Dana had departed for work. It was like any other morning. Alarmed, Karen immediately phoned the family home. Clint picked up the phone and checked the driveway where Holly's car was parked. He told his mother Holly's car was still there. Karen, sensing something was wrong, hung up and called 911. Now, that's just a mother's intuition right there. She's like, this is just all totally out of the ordinary. She's not taking any chances. Go straight to 911. She knew her daughter should already be on the road heading to school. After speaking to his mother, Clint went into the kitchen and looked out the window. Then he saw his sister Holly with a man in camouflage. But at first, Clint wasn't alarmed to see the large, dark-haired stranger. He initially thought the man was Holly's boyfriend, Drew Scott. I expected Drew to be dressed in camouflage, Clint Bobo said later, because Drew and I had talked the night before, and he told me he was going turkey hunting that morning.
This is just it's just a very odd set of circumstances.
Well, I mean,
as the story progresses, I remember, because I followed this case as it was unfolding, some years ago, over a decade ago. And I just could never get past this idea that he sees the sister outside with this strange man.
Yeah.
But then automatically assumes it's her boyfriend, which I can kind of understand that. But it's just it's just so odd.
Well, and also your mother's called you.
Yes.
And said, look, the neighbors say that, their dogs are raising hell. Something's going on. And Holly should already be gone, but you're telling me your car's there. I mean, does that not raise any flags for red flags for you? To even if you do look out the window and think it's her with her boyfriend?
I've always wondered that myself, but then I consider he's 25?
He just got woke up.
He's half asleep.
Or awakened. I don't know what the proper word for it. He got woke up.
Probably just feeling a bit confused, half asleep.
Yeah.
Because I know you're a great example of someone who has a lot of confusion when they first wake up.
Yeah.
Like if I were to say to you, oh my gosh, Dylan, there's a masked man outside, you would just be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then you'd probably roll over and go back to sleep.
Oh, well, that's when I'm truly not awake. But see, okay, it only gets stranger.
It does get stranger.
Holly was kneeling down next to Drew. They were facing each other, and it appeared they were engaged in conversation. The conversation, according to Clint, was difficult to make out, though it sounded like perhaps they were having an argument. Drew appeared to be doing most of the talking, but Clint could make out Holly saying, "No, why?" a few times. Holly sounded upset, even heated. Again, I would go outside and say, hey, is everything okay? Maybe Clint Bobo is like, I'm going to stay out of their business. Okay. I mean, it could be. And honestly, sometimes when you're seeing something extra strange, and especially if you just woke up, as they say around my parts, your brain doesn't want to, it kind of excuses things away. It doesn't want to admit you're like seeing what you're seeing sometimes in a strange situation. I don't know. But Clint and Drew had been friends for a long time, and Clint decided the argument had nothing to do with him. Clint didn't realize Drew was on his grandmother's property. A few moments later, the phone rang again. On the other end was Karen, frantic, telling her son, "That's not Drew. Get a gun and shoot him." Oh my gosh, it's crazy. A half-asleep Drew, believing his mother was overreacting, told her, "You want me to shoot Drew?" explaining he didn't want to call 911 to report his sister was breaking up with her boyfriend. So he's just totally clueless as to what's going on.
Well, and I get that.
And I get that. That explains it.
Like an overreaction, because if it is Holly having a conversation with her boyfriend, an intense conversation, I could see why the brother doesn't want to intervene. This is his buddy. Right? This is his sister. He's not trying to get in the middle of his friend and his sister. That makes sense. And then on top of it, shoot him. I mean, if my mom called me and was like, there's a man outside, you need to shoot him, I'd be like, what? No?
Well, yeah, but I mean, her sentence was, that's not Drew, get a gun and shoot him. So, I mean, but it's just not computing for Clint. He's confused. He thinks he's seen one thing, and he thinks his mother's kind of freaking out, overreacting. So, McCarran is at work a county over. So, when Karen called 911 and she was working in another county, the dispatcher routed the call incorrectly. And that's not going to help the situation any at all. By now, Drew was figuring out something wasn't right. He took another look outside. This time he saw his sister Holly being led into the woods by the strange man. Heart pounding, Clint tried to call his sister's cell phone. See, no. I'm not doing I'm coming up out of the house. I don't care what I got in my hand. I'm getting to my sister and this person. I would freak out. I would be reacting strongly at this point.
Well, you think so, but you've never been in the situation. I mean, it's really easy for us to play armchair detective and be like, oh, well, we would do it this way. But, there's the fact that he's half asleep. He doesn't quite understand what's happening. He doesn't want to overreact because his mother seems to be doing enough of that for both of them.
Right. And it is easy to armchair quarterback situations.
So I think none of us really know how we would behave in these situations.
So in his heart pounding, Clint tried to call his sister's cell phone, which went to voicemail. He then phoned Drew but got no answer. Karen called a third time. When Drew answered, he shared what he had seen. When Clint answered, he shared what he had seen. Karen told Clint to call 911 reporting what he had seen. Clint grabbed a pistol, then headed outside. By Holly's car, he spotted a pool of blood. Clint finally called 911. The police arrived around the same time shortly before Karen. Still confused, Clint thought Drew had gotten a turkey during the hunt. He brought it back to show Holly before she went to class, but there was no turkey. By the time law enforcement was swarming the Bobo property, neighbors had joined in the driveway trying to make sense of what had happened. A family friend named Terry Brumley said it seemed like over 2 hours before anyone went into the woods. Law enforcement was waiting on search dogs and a helicopter. Karen was begging the police to put up roadblocks. So this is infuriating. At this point, if you're Karen, who's been frantic the entire, almost instantly, this would be very frustrating. Now the police are here. My son saying my daughter was, kidnapped off into those woods, basically. There's blood. Why in the world aren't we storming the woods? But they're kind of mustering, waiting for other support elements.
Which is tricky because, I get that you want to have backup. You want to have the support and you don't want to just release volunteers and searchers and neighbors into the woods.
No.
Right? Because that could potentially destroy evidence. But at the same time, the clock is counting down and we have to get in the woods and find this person before they are able to take Holly elsewhere.
Yeah. And
right? I see both sides of it. And if I was a parent, I would be like, to hell with y'all, I'd be in the woods. Like, there would be no stopping me.
I would be in the woods.
They would have to tase me or something.
And I'm sure they're waiting to muster. They want to set up a proper perimeter and all these things. And you can say, well, we know they're in this patch of woods right here. Let's get that surrounded. But, in this situation, what I would want is that no nonsense action movie cop who doesn't follow the rules or protocol. And he just storms off into the woods with both his 45s out. That's who I'd want on my team at that point.
It would be very difficult, I think, if your loved one, if you knew someone had potentially abducted your loved one and they had taken them into woods, on your property,
and
into the woods, there's blood, to just stand there and not be like, to hell with y'all and charge the, it would be so hard.
No, it'd be hard if I was
exercise any amount of patience because her mother is freaking out.
And if I was Clint, I'd be in them damn woods. I know we can say I don't know how. I feel strongly that I would be in the woods at this point. After I called 911, I know the cops are on the way. Jesus, I've got to go get my sister. That's the way I swear I would be feeling.
Such an unusual story.
So her bond with Holly was strong, and as a mother, Karen sensed something was very wrong. She couldn't seem to make the authorities understand how very out of the ordinary this situation was, and the longer they waited, the more precious time they were losing in locating Holly. When news spread through Darden, hundreds of volunteers show up to help with the search, which in this case, in this community, would be most of the community.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like a town of 300.
And you get these strong reactions and huge reactions for searches in all the areas in the country, but it seems to always be a no-brainer in these smaller communities where basically everyone...
Well, yeah, I'm sure everybody kind of knew everybody in this town. It sounds very, very small. They were active in their church, so I'm sure they have a large church family that's willing to help. And then the folks who live in the neighborhood, people who work with mom and dad.
Well, and these are country folks. They have things like horses.
They do.
ATVs,
guns.
Side-by-sides, guns, knowledge of the terrain in the woods.
Trail cams, things like that.
You know, it might even be a tracker who wears moccasins. You know, you never know.
Listens to the wind whisper.
Yeah. It'd be like, this horse scat is 12 days old. And they'd be like, what does that? That doesn't matter. There's no horse involved. Like, oh, I'm just telling you. I've tasted it. I know what it is. Okay, so here they are. Everybody's manning up, or mustering rather. Meanwhile, Bobo's cousin Whitney Duncan, a country singer, used her fame to bring more publicity to the case. Their early efforts turned up several disturbing clues. On April 14th, 2011, searchers found Holly Bobo's lunchbox embroidered with an H about 8 miles from her home on Bible Hill Road. Next, they found a wadded up receipt paper with Holly's name on it, perhaps an old homework assignment. And one searcher found a pair of women's underwear, which I would find particularly disturbing.
Yes.
Outside the house, there was a shoe print from a Crocs brand type of foam clog. Now, this blows my mind that anyone is going to make some kind of a messed up move and drag someone off into the woods with Crocs on. Right? It's not exactly.
Is this because it's not a fashion choice you would go with, or you feel like it's an impractical shoe for kidnapping, committing crimes, traipsing around in the woods?
I'm going to pick B, but if these Crocs are in sport mode, there's nothing that can. I mean, you can do anything in Crocs with sport mode, apparently.
That's what I've heard.
That's with the flap flipped up over the hill.
That's what my daughter says.
Right. So a media frenzy ensues. The pretty blonde captured national attention, which led to a number of tips pouring in. However, the trail soon went cold. Investigators suspected Holly was abducted on her way to school, but who would take her and why? Initially, investigators focused on Terry Britt, a local man known to be a sex offender. Britt, whom locals referred to as Chester the Molester, lived near the Bobo's home. Britt had a history of allegedly stalking women, and his alibi was weak. On the biggest news day in Darden, after Holly's disappearance, he called his wife asking her to come home from her job at the newspaper. A week before Holly's disappearance, Britt had reportedly been staring at Holly and Natalie Bobo. Only a week at... sorry.
Slow down.
Okay. I'm sorry.
It's okay. You can slow down. So you got this creeper guy, nicknamed Chester the Molester.
Yeah, which is disgusting. And that does... anytime a community has a person like this, known sex offender like this, I don't like it. Honestly, I think they're...
I mean, I know they have to live somewhere.
Yeah.
I just don't want them to live next to me.
No, I don't. And I'm sorry, because I think there's a high percentage of sex offenders reoffend. And that's just science, right? I mean, that's
so
the truth.
He had seen Holly and Natalie Bobo a week before, had been staring at her.
To the degree that people remembered.
That's creepy.
That's creepy. And Britt was the subject of a police report. A girl had reported to law enforcement that he was stalking her. But while Britt was interviewed and his home was searched, investigators never brought any charges against him. In total, there were 8 blue-eyed, blonde-haired women who had been stalked by Britt. Women who looked strikingly similar to Holly. Another disturbing detail, right? A search warrant also yielded a shovel, hammer, an axe which cadaver dogs allegedly hit on for human decomposition, along with a chainsaw purchased at the end of April. Sounds like a real creep, right?
That's scary. So how do cadaver dogs smell or get a hint of human remains on an axe and then nothing comes of it? That's not okay.
A shovel.
I have questions.
Yeah, a shovel, a hammer, and an axe. Even if this isn't connected to Holly, why in the hell do these implements that would be used to dispose or, bury a body smell like human decomposition?
Well, that's pretty strange.
Those
are average household items.
They should not have decomposition.
Well, they
smell.
shouldn't, but I'm just saying it's not uncommon to find those items in someone's house, and that doesn't necessarily make them a murderer.
No, not necessarily.
Right? But the human remains, the decomp smell, it's pretty specific.
Now, the dogs alerting on these tools would be very disturbing. And now I'm not an expert on cadaver dogs. I don't know if it's decomposition. I would expect it's purely human decomposition they've been trained to, which has a very specific smell to rule out things like I buried my dog or I buried, an animal that died in the woods. So, yeah, I would definitely have more questions for Mr. Britt. Holly's phone pinged as though it was traveling north. For around 30 minutes, the phone was in a wooded area off I-40, on a route different from Holly's house. South, the phone and SIM card would later be found, so in the opposite direction. The search for Holly continued through, though the leads were cooling. It was in March 2014 that an intellectually disabled man named John Dylan Adams was picked up on an unrelated weapons charge. During his interrogation, the man confessed he had seen the pretty blonde with his brother Zach and a man named Jason Autry after her abduction.
So first big break in the case, it sounds like.
So you got to imagine the investigators are rather excited about this tip. You have a guy who's caught on an unrelated charge. You got him in there, and it's almost like while you're interrogating him on this unrelated case, he kind of cracks and tells you what he knows about Holly's abduction. On April 13th, Dylan Adams said he saw Holly alive when he went to his brother's house to get a truck. According to Dylan, Holly was wearing a pink t-shirt, sitting in a green chair in the living room. His brother Zach was wearing camouflage shorts, a black t-shirt, and a pair of green Crocs.
The Crocs.
It does not state whether or not they're in sport mode, but he's got them on his feet. Zach allegedly told Dylan he had a video of himself raping Holly Bobo, though it was never found. Okay. Dylan's confession would later be recanted under suggestions it was coerced. However, his statements did lead to the arrest of Zach Adams, Jason Autry, and a man named Shane Alston. So, here you have a man with cognitive issues, considered mentally disabled. And we've heard this a million times before in some famous cases. They're saying, people are saying later, hey, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's confused.
He's making this confession under some type of duress.
Yeah, and
he's not, maybe doesn't have the cognitive ability to make the right decisions
or
to
understand.
fully understand his Miranda rights, or that he can have access to a lawyer or something like that.
So, but the authorities went ahead and arrested all three men that he
all three men's
that he implicated in it, and they were charged with aggravating kidnapping, rape, and murder in the first degree. Mark and Jeffrey Piercy, two brothers, were accused of evidence tampering and accessory after the fact, but those charges were later dropped. Alston was never formally charged, but a year later he committed suicide. In September 2014, Holly's partial remains were found. Two ginseng hunters made the discovery near a logging road adjacent to County Corner Road near Decatur County.
And you know what? This is the location where her cell phone first pinged about a half hour or so after she was taken.
Really?
It's like the same area.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this was 20 miles from her home. Her skull, teeth, several ribs, and a single shoulder blade were found. The skull was pierced with a bullet hole, the trajectory going from the back right through to her left cheekbone, so she was shot from behind, directly behind, slightly tilted up.
It's like execution style.
Yeah, definitely. As the investigation continued to unfold, Dylan's confession would be found inconsistent with the collected evidence. And that's one of the reasons police hold some information close to their chest, or however you want to say it, for this very reason. So when someone does confess, if they have these interesting details, and they know the details
kept under wraps,
that the public does not know, the media does not know, then it can give them, if they don't or get them all wrong, that can give them an idea whether a person's being truthful or not. The case saw several setbacks, including Shane Alston's suicide, changes to the prosecution's team, and disagreements with the TBI. The TBI missed several deadlines, refused to produce evidence against the subjects, and changed the charges against the defendants. Now, in this case, we see one of those, it seems to be like this It's always great to see how these different agencies work together to solve a case.
It's also not good when they start having almost like a pissing contest
But
with each other.
yeah, it's that cliche pissing contest you see in every movie. When the FBI or whoever comes, state investigators come in to take over, it pisses off the small town sheriff. But yeah, it really does happen. According to the According to the defense attorneys, a year after the men's arrest, they had not received a full accounting of the forensic testing done on the case evidence. Tensions ran so high that for a period, the TBI withdrew their services from the district, which is
That's almost unheard of, right?
Yeah.
I mean, are they allowed to do that if you're a state agency?
I don't know, but I've never actually heard that where
Wow.
they're just like, screw you, I'm going taking my ball and going home, right? Because these are state resources funded by state taxpayers, right? And I just don't think you should be able to withdraw your withdrawal like that. Shane Kyle Austin was initially offered immunity in exchange for information regarding the locations of Bobo's body. Phone records indicate that Austin was in contact with Adams several times on the day of Bobo's abduction, and police believe that Austin helped dispose of the body. The agreement was withdrawn after Austin was unable or unwilling to lead them to the body, and the district attorney released a statement saying that Austin has not been completely truthful, forthcoming or cooperative as to any and all aspects of this investigation. In April, Austin's attorney filed a complaint against the state asking for an immediate and permanent injunction preventing the state from charging Austin. Austin was found deceased in February 2015 in a Bartow, Florida hotel room. He had committed suicide. Austin's attorney blamed the suicide on the continual threats of prosecution as well as the witch hunt style of the investigation, where they relied on rumors instead of evidence. His attorney insists he had nothing to do with the murder and cooperated fully with the police. Now, that's his attorney's take on it, but many would imagine that it's guilt led to him committing suicide.
Okay, and that's the thing. If you play devil's advocate, is what if he really was innocent? What if this man had nothing to do with this case at all? He was completely innocent. He didn't have any information and was being railroaded by law enforcement. This looming threat of arrest
And prison for life.
And your name's out there. It's all over the media. I mean, how can you move on and get a job?
Yeah.
Have a relationship? I mean, there's like
It's
a lot.
terrible.
Yeah. I mean, it almost reminds me of the Richard Jewell fella with the Atlanta bombings and how his life was ruined in the court of public opinion and he was completely innocent.
Yeah, and the only way to make them lighten up or do less to you is to give them information that you do not have or have access to. So that's really a bad situation to be in, and we don't know what his mental history was or if he's ever, fought with he could have already had issues, and this just simply make it way worse. And then that would be so sad to know that he was completely innocent and they kept on until he killed himself. That's a very sad thought.
But I mean, it sounds like he probably knew something.
Possibly. In 2017, Jason Autry agreed to testify against Zach Adams. See, interesting. One of the three guys charged is saying, okay, I'll be state's evidence. Zach, who maintains his innocence, was sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years for his role in Holly's kidnapping and murder. The narrative presented at trial was that Austin and the Adams brothers went to the Bobo residence to teach Clint Bobo to make methamphetamine.
So we're finally getting a motive? Because this entire time I've been wondering, what was the purpose in this? Was the purpose to abduct Holly? Did they know her?
Right.
Or was there some other reason and the abduction was sort of a secondary to another crime? I mean, it's just a very strange story.
Yeah, well, and as is always the case, the state will have their theory of what happened. So here's their theory. So they show up to show Clint Bobo how to make methamphetamine, which is an allegation that Bobo denies. Holly Bobo came out of the house screaming and hollering, and the men then abducted her. The prosecution alleged that Austin was the man whom Clint Bobo had described as walking into the woods with his sister, Now, I have an issue with that. Okay? So if these guys have come over here to show him how to make drugs, they're bad guys or whatever. And his sister is like, what the hell are y'all doing here? Get out of here, you pieces of shit, whatever. You're just going to let them take, for one, you're just going to let them take your sister. And if you are that devious and evil, are you going to tell anybody about it? Why wouldn't you just tell your mom, I don't know, her car, she's not here, or I haven't seen her? Are you going to describe the crime that you're a part of happening to your mother over the phone? It doesn't make any sense at all.
I know, and I don't want to be accusatory because we don't know for certain that her brother was actually involved.
But
it also maybe explains a little bit of his behavior, why he was reticent to follow through with calling 911 and confronting this person.
It's true.
And from what I understand, Dylan, the reason that they pointed fingers at Shane Austin was he was the only one of these suspects that was tall enough to fit the description of the camouflaged man.
Right. So the other guys are obviously not
tall enough,
not big-bodied enough to be this person. So
but it's also easy to pin it on the fella who's deceased.
Well, and they can't defend themselves.
Right.
Yeah, he was the only one of the men who was close to the size of the man Clint had described to his mother. The 3 men were alleged to have raped Holly Bobo in a local barn owned by the grandmother of both Austin and Autry. 2 pieces of paper belonging to Holly Bobo, a receipt and a note card, were found on the road where Austin lived. The receipt was found 75 feet from the driveway.
Ooh, that's telling.
That's interesting. The prosecution also presented other pieces of circumstantial evidence linking Zach Adams to the murder, including that he drove a white truck, and a neighbor of the Bobo family had seen a white truck driving rapidly on the morning of the murder. Some witnesses testified that Adams made statements implicating himself in Bobo's disappearance. Adams' then-girlfriend, Rebecca Earp, testified that he said he would tie me up just like he did Holly Bobo, and nobody would ever see me again. Zach Adams also allegedly threatened his brother after his arrest that he would put him in a hole beside her if he didn't keep his mouth shut.
Whoa.
Well, if he made either of those statements, even if you're just trying to be like some kind of a badass, or like seem like a badass to your girlfriend or something, is a damn horrible statement to make, right?
Well, Dylan, I had read online that Zachary Adams had a history of heavy drug use, but he also was involved in a heist.
Really?
Of freshwater pearls from a nearby Tennessee shell company in Camden.
Wow. Okay.
So while he was in custody, circumstantial evidence began to appear online. So some friends of Holly Bobo's were looking through Adam's Facebook page and discovered a post that was made the same day that Holly disappeared. And the post said, you know you never was, you stupid whore.
Okay.
The friend then noticed another post that showed Adams dressed in camouflage gear with the caption, "Who am I looking for?"
Okay, that's not strange at all.
The photo with the camo gear that's captioned, "Who am I looking for?" was published when the reward for information on Bobo's disappearance increased.
Wow. So, if anything, he's a dumbass, right? I mean, it sounds like a dumbass to me.
Yeah.
And so, a gun listed as an Arminus model HW5 .32 caliber Smith & Wesson long revolver was introduced into evidence by the prosecution. A local man, Victor Dinsmore, led police to the gun, claiming that Austin and Autry sold him the weapon in exchange for drugs. The gun was reportedly found in a body of water. And I'm going to assume it sounds like she was shot directly back in the head, in the back of the head, execution style, and it sounds like the projectile exited the body, so they don't have that for ballistics, and so it'd be hard to really nail the gun down, in my opinion. You can maybe assume by the damage done that possibly this caliber gun did it. Dylan Adams accepted an Alford plea in January 2018, which says there is strong evidence to convict him. Now, we all know about the Alford plea. It allows you to maintain your plea of innocence, but what you're actually saying is you feel like the prosecution has enough evidence to get you convicted by the jury, which I think is just a damn, it's an oxymoron. The Alford plea, I know the famous case it came from was actually Alford versus state of North Carolina. It's almost like they're saying that they put a case together that sounds right, and they're going to believe it, but I'm still innocent, which is a really strange thing to me.
It is odd.
He was given 35 years in prison. Jason Autry's cooperation earned him a significantly reduced sentence. He was released in September of 2020. In 2017, Whitney Duncan released a song called Better Place in memory of Holly. She was a staunch defender of her cousin Clint after the case was subject of intense media scrutiny. Some people pointed to Clint Bobo's statements. At first, he claimed his sister was dragged into the woods by a masked man, but later said it appeared she was willingly walking into the woods with her kidnapper. Some speculated that Clint killed Holly, or at least was involved in the murder plot. Everyone asked, why did he stand by and let his sister get abducted? Being the sole witness to her abduction, it was only natural that Clint faced a lot of questions. Defenders pointed to the fact that he took lie detector tests, handed over his cell phone, and was questioned for more than 17 hours in his sister's disappearance. And I got to say, a 17-hour interrogation is a long one.
That's brutal.
That's a long one. And those are the types of interrogations that people get into psychological state, even people who are fully functional, or just say whatever they want them to hear to just make it stop. And that's how sometimes you end up in these coerced confessions. Even we can sit here and say, I'd never do that. When you're actually subjected to some of these tactics they use in interrogation and stuff like that, you never know.
It's true.
There's a psychological element. They know what they're doing when they leave you in the room.
False confessions are definitely a thing.
Yeah, they're trained in psychology. They know what they're doing, and they do all these things for a reason. And I'm not saying to get false confessions, but to make someone crack. And you can make an innocent person crack as well. Zach Adams, defense attorney, believes that the initial suspect, Terry Britt, a sex offender, is the real killer. His physical description matches the one Clint gave to authorities. Clint also said a voice sample belonging to Britt was similar to the one he heard during Holly's abduction. A palm print found on Holly's car at the crime scene does not exclude him. And a U.S. Marshal Service inspector alleged that Britt at one point said he would plead to the crime. So, are innocent men behind bars?
I think it's a good question. But, Dylan Adams, not only does he have a history of drug abuse, he has a history of violence as well, Dylan. Dating back to 2002, at the age of 18, Adams had his first documented run-in with cops. And 2 years later, in 2004, he was arrested for aggravated domestic assault against his mother. He took a 9mm Glock and shot his mother in the knee.
Jesus.
Yeah. His mom had to file, some sort of protective order. And in the court documents, the mother and stepfather said that they were in fear of their lives, that he was a danger to them and the community and other relatives. He was also arrested for threatening to shoot his grandparents in 2005 with a shotgun and was ordered to stay away from his grandparents as well as his parents.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he's certainly not some poor innocent being who's never harmed a fly, right?
No, he had arrests in 2007 for theft of property, also drugs, methamphetamine and marijuana. And 9 days before Holly Bobo vanished, this was in 2011, rangers in the Natchez Trace State Park arrested him on fabricating and tampering with evidence, assault on an officer, drug possession with a resisting arrest charge as well. He was released on a $12,500 bond.
Okay.
So this was just days before. And he had 5 prior assault arrests, which, that's a pretty disturbing number for anyone, but especially an accused kidnapper.
Well, no, that's obviously a history of violence, full-on assault charges, and this heavy drug use. You could be in some kind of strange drug-addled psychosis, and there's no telling what you would do or why you would do it.
What I do think is interesting is the evidence linking Adams to Bobo has been pretty scant. It was mostly circumstantial, like those Facebook posts. And his lawyer refused to pursue a plea deal for Adams because he believed his client to be completely innocent. The lawyer said the state has been very clear in their discussions with me that there is no DNA that links Holly to Zachary Adams.
Well, I've got to say, that's one thing in this case missing is the smoking gun, the hardcore scientific evidence, because everything that you had in the story here was purely circumstantial. Even though you can say, pieces of paper belonging to Holly 75 feet down the road from his grandparents' driveway or whatever, that could end up there that could come out of a car.
That's very coincidental, Dylan, but you're right. It could. You're saying there's a chance.
Well, that's the whole point of the whole thing with circumstantial evidence.
There is enough reasonable doubt in my brain that if I were a juror, now I would have to see the complete evidence, but based on the fact that it's mostly circumstantial, I don't know if I could convict these guys.
And see, that's like with the suspect
Which
who committed.
Sucks. Because let's be honest, they probably did it.
Well, like Kyle Austin's suicide. That can go. Your devil's advocate speech there certainly has merit, and I can see how that could put a lot of pressure and just be terrible for someone. You've ruined their whole lives, basically, if they are innocent. But if you're on that jury and you see that he's committed suicide, I'm sorry, but I think a lot of people would
would assume it's out of guilt.
Just the weight of the guilt. And if that one guy killed himself because he couldn't stand to accept the charges and for his actions and all that, then the rest of these guys must be guilty too. See, that there's a problem in that thought process as well. That could very well happen.
I've always found
a crazy
this
story.
Case to be just so odd.
And there's still,
as I've said before, it's just a very odd story. And I never could wrap my head around what was the exact motive.
Well, what they offered up with them showing up to show Clint Bobo how to make methamphetamine, and Holly coming out there because we know she was a straight-laced student, good young person, and telling, mad because they're there or whatever.
Run them off.
Yeah, but
I
then
see somebody with a broom like, shoo,
but then Clint just allows it to happen to his sister, and it's just, I don't know, that seems like a lot to me. And he took lie detectors, and they didn't say it outright, but I'm going to assume he passed them, gave him all his information, all his cell phone, cooperated fully. So that just doesn't really add up for me. That's a pretty flimsy scenario put forth by the state, in my opinion. I'm sorry.
It doesn't really make sense to me. If they were theorizing that, this Adams had spotted her, had a crush on her, stalked her, planned to kidnap her for the purpose of, raping and murdering her or something.
Or
I could buy that storyline, but I don't know, this theory that they've put forth, I don't know if I'm sold on it.
Or even if she did run him off, like, get the hell out of here, get away from my brother and all that, but later on something happened to her, like they like, screw her, I'm going to get revenge. That's more plausible to me than them just instantly taking her in that moment and her brother standing idly by and allowing it to happen. But
then again, I think when you have a group of people high on methamphetamine, their behavior is so erratic and unpredictable that who knows what they were truly thinking when they drove out to the Bobo residence.
It's true. If they're all high on meth, and for brothers using it as well, I'm just speculating, no evidence of that, then it's not going to make sense to rational people because they're doing irrational things. And you were talking about the armchair quarterbacking. And it is really easy to do, like, well, I would have done this or I would have done that. Well, you sat there to had time to contemplate what you would have done and all that. And it just doesn't happen like that in real time. And I was talking and discussing in Discord, we were talking about the Idaho college murders. And I was just like, so much of this just doesn't add up. You got a dog in the house who's not really barking, but it turns out He was. You could hear him barking on a neighbor's security camera, actually. And you got the roommate who comes out, sees a strange man leaving, and goes back in her room and just locks herself in her room and stays there for hours. Doesn't call authorities. I found that strange, but people have pointed out that when you live in a roommate situation, you might be used to people coming in and out, extra people being there, people leaving. You could even be pissed because people are making noise and it's late. You could have been having some drinks. You could be trying to go to sleep, and you could simply just open the door and be like, who the hell's that? Not again. And just slam the door shut. There's all these things about perception that kind of makes more sense to me. That, yeah, it's easy to sit back and say what you would do, or that none of that makes sense. But I've never even lived in a roommate situation. So I haven't experienced these types of things with roommates.
Right. I know. Well, I was briefly discussing, I did have a roommate once that was known to have visitors at all hours of the evening.
Oh, yeah?
Much to my
chagrin.
Much to my disappointment. I did not like this. So, yeah, I know what it's like to have a roommate who's constantly bringing strange people into the house.
Now, is this the roommate where you came back from work and there's just like 4 or 5 horny Marines in the living room?
Yeah.
And they're wondering why you don't want to hang out and party down?
Yeah.
And when you walked in, it was like somebody else brought the second course because she's possibly the first course, but they're just like all these extra Marines and they think you're there for them, right?
Oh, yeah.
But you let them know quickly.
Yeah, so I had been on duty for 24 hours, and I was exhausted because throughout the evening we'd had a couple different fire drills and some different trainings.
Busy night.
It was just a busy night. I was so tired. I remember coming home. It's 8 o'clock at night. I've been on duty 24 hours. I am so ready to just take a hot shower, go to bed in my bed, not on a terrible rack on a ship,
yeah.
Where you have no room. So my roommate at the time, she had met a Marine online.
Oh,
and
wow.
he had driven down from Miramar or something, down to San Diego, and happened to bring his 3 friends along.
Oh.
So there were 4 Marines in my living room, and I walk in and I'm like, what the hell's going on? She's like, oh, well, I met this guy, but he brought his friends and was wanting me to hang. I was like, no. I'm not okay with this. We don't know these. I've always been very cautious, and I'm like, we don't know these people. I don't want them in the house. You need to do something. Y'all can hang out, but you need to go away.
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Yeah, you can go hang out at a bar, a restaurant, what have you, go to a movie, but I'm not okay with these strangers being in my house.
So you're not even okay if I go on to bed and go to sleep. You're not comfortable them being in your house, period.
No.
Because
I had a lock on the door, but if somebody really wanted to break down the door and kill me, they could.
Well, yeah.
So, I think when you get into those roommate situations, you have to be very open and clear and have communication about guests and some sort of guest policy that works for both of you.
You need the roommate contract.
Because I was not okay with having strangers in our house.
Yeah, but it does.
Don't bring strange men home from the bar. I don't like that. I don't want people I don't know spending the night, hanging out. It's just not a good. It was, in my opinion, a very dangerous combination.
Well, yeah, just because, and on top of that, even if they're totally cool, one thing we know is they're probably all 4 horny and thinking they're going to score. So that right there alone is enough reason for them to get on somewhere.
But if you are in a situation where you have a roommate that has a stream of guests and you're accustomed to maybe opening the door and seeing some rando in the living room, then I could see where maybe you wouldn't
freak out.
Because you're just like, oh, okay.
Not again.
And I think maybe when you're younger, you're more susceptible to that kind of lifestyle of oh yeah, cool, we're young and everybody's just hanging out, and you don't see danger and you don't see fear and everything.
Yeah.
I've always been completely anxious and nervous, and since I was a child, I knew lurking around every corner was a serial killer.
I've been hypervigilant since I was a young person as well, but not everybody's like us.
No.
And I think,
of course, that's also probably born out of serious childhood trauma.
Maybe. Maybe, or just your love for true crime that you didn't
But
realize
I've
you had.
always been very cautious and concerned. So yeah, if I saw someone dragging my sister into the woods or some rando in my living room dressed all in black, I would need to check out, make sure everything was okay.
I'm not going to be okay with that. But that's probably why I never had roommates.
Well, some people point out, Dylan, which, again, it's kind of easy on our end to point out her brother's behavior and some of the inconsistencies with the initial story. And some people point out that it actually would make more sense if Clint admitted, yes, I had these guys come to the house to teach me to make meth. And that could also explain why his mother was so on board with just shoot and ask questions later.
Okay.
Like maybe they'd had a conversation and they didn't exactly tell police the full details of the conversation.
Okay.
I mean, this is all
fan theory. Right.
Right? This is all speculation. But it would maybe make some more sense if he did admit that, because otherwise, like, we don't really know why Adams or these other fellas like Autry just showed up at the Bobo house.
Well, see, okay, that's the interesting point you're making, because
because he was convicted on such thin evidence. I mean, it almost does seem like they just wanted to get closure and they arrest these guys and they convict them, but there's not a ton of evidence.
So she's abducted. I think we can all agree. She's abducted in the driveway of her own home. Okay? So this is a very unlikely place for a stranger to abduct you. Would you agree? Now, if you do have some kind of a stalker who's been watching and knows people's patterns and schedule, it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility for them to try to abduct you in a driveway. But certainly, I guess that could go a long way to explain why those guys were at his house. And obviously, if that is the truth, Clint would his best. Well, for one, you should be like, leave my fucking sister alone and try to kill everybody. But you certainly, even after the fact, if you were scared, dumb, on drugs, whatever, you should come be honest then and say, look, these assholes come over. They're trying to show me I've been dabbling with drugs. And then they attacked my sister. And then you be, no matter what happens to you, charges you might get, you be the state's number one witness, right? But, I mean, just to hide the fact that if I was dabbling in drugs or trying to make drugs, I would not hide that if it went south and my sister was killed. Because now me doing this has caused my sister to be killed, right? So now I've got to be truthful, and the people who did this need to be brought to justice.
Again, it's a lot to take in, and it's a case where I don't exactly know how I feel about the end result.
I agree.
Because I just don't feel like the motive makes sense, especially if Clint is not admitting to his part in it. And how did the mom know you need to shoot this guy? It's not Drew. I mean, there just seems to be like there's parts missing, or that we're not exactly getting a full reporting on everything that happened. I don't know. It's just very strange. And then I still have issues with there isn't DNA evidence. And do we really have anything tying Zach Adams to the Bobo residence?
Or any of the alleged perpetrators to the victim.
Autry. I mean, what is the relationship? I don't know.
If you grab someone and drag them off into the woods, there's going to be DNA transfers. Incidental, or whatever they call that, topical contact, where they can actually find your skin cells on the, or whatever. There's going to be that. And and then all three of you rape her, but there's no, there's no rape kit with the DNA to any of the perpetrators.
Well, I mean, I suppose the decomp by the time they found her was
okay,
factored into the lack of evidence.
Okay, well, I see. All right, could be. Very, very strange case.
It is. I'm interested what other folks think about it. So if you have theories, ideas, you think we're absolutely wrong, these guys are 100% guilty, send us an email, mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. I'd like to hear some feedback.
Yeah, or if you have any information that Heather did not scrape from the Ethernet, we'd love to hear it.
Well, Dylan, I don't want to give you like a case that would take you 2 hours.
No.
Okay, I was trying to be simple, concise, was trying to be helpful for you. I think you did great.
Well, yes, this episode was written by Heather Packer, produced by Heather Packer, and uploaded by Heather Packer, and with vocalist stylings by Dylan Packer.
And Dylan, I appreciate you.
Our executive producer is Rufus, and he's laying there in the sunspot, soaking it up because he realizes what a good show he's put together.
He really loves the sliding glass door.
And I thank Heather for doing that. I hope it wasn't too cumbersome on people's ears. And yeah, I'll try that a little bit more. Maybe I'll get better at it.
Thank you so much, Dylan.
And thank you.